In the deserts of the Middle East, where the horizon burns gold and red at dusk, and the air carries whispers of ancient conflict, a new chapter of politics unfolded under the banner of peace. For decades, the war between Israel and Hamas had seemed eternal, an endless cycle of rockets and retaliation, ceasefires and broken promises. Every few years, the world watched the same tragedy replay, homes reduced to rubble, lives lost, and hope slipping through the cracks of history. Yet, amid this chaos, one man, bold, unpredictable, and unapologetic, believed he could end what generations had failed to solve. That man was Donald J. Trump. To his followers, Trump was not just a politician, he was the dealmaker, the negotiator, the man who could turn conflict into compromise. When he announced his plan for Middle East peace, what he proudly called the deal of the century, the world paused. Trump claimed he would deliver what no president before him could, peace between Israel and the Palestinians, particularly Hamas in Gaza. The promise sounded monumental. But as diplomats would later whisper, the devil was in the details. Behind the cameras, away from the bold speeches and flags, a web of secret negotiations was quietly taking shape. In Washington, Tel Aviv, Doha, and Cairo, powerful men sat around tables covered in maps, intelligence reports, and draft agreements. These were not idealists dreaming of peace. They were strategists, each protecting their own interests. For the Americans, it was about cementing a historic diplomatic legacy. For Israel, it was about securing recognition and control. For the Arab mediators, it was about stability and avoiding another regional explosion. Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner, became the architect of the plan. Young, ambitious, and untested in traditional diplomacy, Kushner saw the Middle East not as a battlefield, but as a business deal waiting to be structured. He believed economic opportunity could replace decades of hatred. His message was simple: prosperity brings peace. Billions of dollars in investment were promised to Gaza and the West Bank, roads, factories, schools, and hospitals, if Hamas would agree to lay down its arms. It was a tempting vision, but one built on fragile ground. The plan offered Palestinians what it called limited autonomy. They could manage their internal affairs, but Israel would still control borders, airspace, and security checkpoints. To many in Gaza, it was not peace. It was submission. A state in name, but not in reality. As the details leaked, anger erupted in the streets. Protesters burned posters of Trump and Kushner. Palestinian leaders called it a betrayal of their rights, a peace plan that favored one side while silencing the other, and yet not everyone opposed it. In the quiet halls of power across the Arab world, some leaders saw opportunity. Nations like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Bahrain had already begun softening ties with Israel through the Abraham Accords. These agreements, brokered by Trump, encouraged trade, intelligence sharing, and open diplomacy. For these Gulf states, aligning with Israel meant access to American weapons, technology, and favor. The Palestinian cause, long symbolic in Arab politics, was now being quietly overshadowed by economic interests. Meanwhile, intelligence agencies, Mossad, the CIA, and Egyptian security were deeply involved behind the scenes. They helped outline the framework for security coordination in Gaza. There were even discussions about forming a multinational peacekeeping force to patrol the border, possibly made up of Arab troops with Israeli oversight. It was a plan crafted not for justice, but for control. Control through cooperation. Trump presented his plan at a White House ceremony in January 2020, flanked by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The image was powerful, two allies united under the American flag. Missing from that stage, however, were any Palestinian representatives. Hamas rejected the plan outright. The Palestinian Authority refused to participate. Still, Trump called it a historic step forward. This could be the last opportunity for peace, he said, but the timing could not have been worse. The region was already boiling. Gaza's economy was collapsing, unemployment soared above 50%, and despair filled the air. To many Palestinians, Trump's deal was salt on an open wound. It promised prosperity but ignored pain. It offered money but not dignity. Behind the scenes, there were reports of secret meetings between American envoys and Hamas intermediaries in Qatar. Doha had become the quiet broker between the two enemies, funneling funds into Gaza to prevent total collapse. According to some sources, Trump's administration was exploring a back channel to offer Hamas indirect incentives for calm. These included humanitarian aid, electricity projects, and reconstruction contracts. It was diplomacy through dollars. But then came the turning point, the new wave of violence. Airstrikes lit up the sky, rockets rained on cities, and once again, the dream of peace turned to dust. The Trump plan, hailed as a breakthrough, had collapsed before it could even begin. The fragile calm had been an illusion, one explosion away from ruin. Critics argued that the plan was never about peace. It was about containment. It sought not to resolve the conflict, but to freeze it under a controlled structure where one side remained dominant. Trump had delivered victories for Israel, recognition of Jerusalem as its capital, the moving of the U.S. Embassy, and the recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. To Palestinians, these were not steps toward peace, but confirmation that Washington had chosen a side. Yet Trump's supporters painted a different picture. They claimed he had reshaped the Middle East, breaking old taboos and forcing the region to think pragmatically. By normalizing ties between Israel and Arab nations, he had reduced Hamas's regional influence. They said peace with Israel was no longer impossible. It was inevitable. But peace for whom? As 2020 gave way to new global crises, a pandemic, elections, and economic collapse, the deal quietly vanished from headlines. It was never officially canceled, but it faded into diplomatic limbo. Still, its consequences lingered. New alliances had been formed. Old wounds had been reopened. And in the heart of Gaza, ordinary people continued to live under siege, wondering if peace was ever more than a political performance. For the families who lived through the bombings, for the children who played under drones instead of blue skies, the words peace plan had lost their meaning. What they needed was not a deal written in Washington, but dignity, safety, and a future. Yet, in the grand halls of global politics, such voices were rarely heard. Trump's peace plan revealed a truth that the world often ignores, that in diplomacy, the fine print matters more than the promises. Every clause, every word, every boundary line drawn by foreign hands carries consequences on the ground. The devil truly was in the details, in the clauses about borders, the maps that slice through old towns, the economic packages tied to political obedience. And so history repeated itself. Like Oslo, like Camp David, like every historic handshake before it, Trump's Israel-Hamas peace deal joined the long list of dreams that died before reaching reality. But it left behind lessons: that peace without justice is fragile, that prosperity cannot replace equality, and that power cannot dictate reconciliation. In the final analysis, Trump's deal was both bold and flawed, an attempt to build peace from the top down instead of the ground up. It reflected his business instincts, transactional, fast, results-oriented. But the Middle East was never a boardroom. It was a battlefield of memories, faith, and identity, where history itself refused to be negotiated. And as the sun sets over Gaza's skyline, its orange light reflecting off broken glass and bullet-marked walls, one thing remains unchanged. Peace is not written in speeches or sealed in signatures. It is written in how people live, how children wake, and whether the next generation grows up free from fear. Trump's deal may one day be remembered as an ambitious attempt or as another illusion in the long, painful history of the region. But for now, it stands as a reminder that in global politics, every promise carries a price. Because peace built on politics is temporary. But peace built on justice, that's eternal. And that was the devil in the details.